and Go Growth Tactics webinar. My name is Jim Wilcox. I am the owner of the Sandler Performance Center here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We have an office in South Bend as well, pretty much cover the whole state of Indiana, though we do have clients coast to coast. Typically, I'm joined by John Vanderslice and Tim Berry. However, both have had things come up today and they're unable to attend. They both send their regards. So we appreciate you being here and spending a half an hour with us. If you're new to this webinar, our intent is to give you a topic and then a handful of things you can do on your way out of the webinar to take some tactics and put them to good use. Today's talk is on a topic I'm actually very passionate about, strangely enough. I never would have thought I would have been in a sales role. That is self-esteem. Can it be the difference maker in good sales habits versus bad sales habits? So buckle up and get ready for some hopefully good takeaways for you. One of the things that we like to do is have you get your chat fingers kind of warmed up. And so the question that I'll ask you to put into chat, when you do so, make sure you select all panelists and attendees, not just all panelists. That way we can capture your great questions. Where do you see negative self-talk, low self-image, low self-esteem holding back your sales team or your own individual performance? How and where do you see that? Love to hear your comments in chat on that. I know that as a young sales professional, I had a lot of fear, worry, and doubt in my head. And sometimes that would, come into my own sales process. I would spend too much time thinking about ruminating on certain things I said, things I did, and it had an effect. And certainly you see it either if you look inward to yourself or as you look in your teams, but I'm curious where you might see that happening. So share your thoughts, your ideas in chat on this question. Do you see it? And if you don't, throw that in there as well. So Andrew, thank you for the comment. It reduces the prospect list. Totally get that. It makes us, for some, fear, worry, doubt about who we're prospecting. It takes too much time. We don't get to be as effective as we could be. Todd, during the act of negotiating, negative self-talk could derail your negotiations. Absolutely. We give in. We're afraid of losing the deal. We become emotionally attached to the deal, et cetera. So that can certainly happen. Leo says he sees it in cold calling. Curious, Leo, how you see that in cold calling. I know from experience managing people, negative self-talk, talking yourself out of either A, getting started, or B, moving that cold calling forward, getting into a rhythm or a flow with it could certainly hold you back. Jody says maybe having the confidence to have a difficult but necessary conversation with the client. Absolutely. Jody, it's a great point. Negative self-talk can prevent us from doing that. So can low self-image. Leo, thank you for the clarification. Having to do it over the phone versus live. And that's one thing we see sales professionals still kind of struggling with to a certain degree. I was speaking to a sales team earlier. They are very used to, by this date, January 20th, they would have spent a good 5 to 10 days in the air, flying from place to place, but that is not the case now. They've had 0 travel days, and it, has not only been all of 2020, but they're kicking off 2021 that way. And so they are having to get used to prospecting a different way. And for any of them that might struggle with this, it could be a challenge. So I found this graph as I was preparing for this webinar and took the liberties of it. I talk about the roller coaster all the time in training. Don't get on the roller coaster, right? And sales, for those of us as individual producers or those of us who are managing a team, sales can be a roller coaster. We start out somewhere along this path, optimism, excitement, thrill, euphoria. a little bit of anxiety, denial, fear, depression, panic. There's a capitulation point, maybe depression, and then the cycle begins all over again with a little hope, relief, optimism, excitement, thrill, euphoria, anxiety, denial, fear. Not all of us get on the roller coaster. Certainly see it with sales professionals. For some people, that's the thrill of the chase. For others, that is what makes selling very, very difficult. For those of you that are familiar with Sandler, you've been around Sandler for a while. I'm curious also, do you guys see this? So we'll give you a bonus chat question today. Do you see the roller coaster in your worlds? Do you see the ups and downs like this? I found this graph to be very interesting, but do you guys see it in your world? So throw that in chat while I continue to talk here. We are a rules-based training platform. And so there are many, many rules in Sandler. In fact, we've written a couple books on them, those rules. But one of the rules that stuck with me early on is you can only perform in your role to the degree that you see yourself conceptually, or literally, as this says, you can only perform in your roles in a manner that is consistent with how you see yourself conceptually. In other words, if I have poor self-esteem, I should not expect world-class performance until I get my self-esteem issue addressed. So this one stuck out to me early on in terms of making sure that my head is always in the right place. One of the things that we talk about, and some of you that have been familiar with Sandler will get, others, this might be a new concept to you. We talk about the concept of IR theory. And IR theory has to do with our identity and our role. So when we look at our identity is who we are at the core, and our role is what we do. We'll come back to that in a minute. On this chart, you'll see 3 watermarked psychological positions. They're not judgments. They're really psychological positions that we take. Those of a winner or having a winner mentality, those of an at-leaster, having an at-leaster mentality, and then at the bottom, a non-winner mentality. And so let's kind of break those down for a minute. If I'm taking the psychological position of a mindset, and think about these for yourself and or for your team, I've got some underlying attitudes or underlying mindsets. If I'm a winner, I have an expectation of success. I see failure as a learning opportunity. I fear very little. I'm not afraid to fail because I know that failure is my opportunity to learn. I believe anything's possible. I'm goal-oriented. And so as I navigate, and there are many, many other attributes, right? So jot down a couple attributes that you see with those who have a winner or a success-oriented psychological, position that they take in addition to these. So expectation of success, failure being a learning opportunity, little fear, doubt, worry, anything being possible, goal orientation. What type of things are we missing here? So as you're doing that, look at at-leaster. If I take the psychological position of at-leaster, my underlying mindset might be success comes and goes, right? I justify the status quo. Some things are possible, maybe not all. Goals are more directed to me than ones that I set. And then I tend to be very comfortable where I'm at. Andrew Emmett said winner. They're routine based. At-leasters may go more with the flow. Their motivation is very, very different. So let's go to the next one, which is non-winner. If I take a non-winner position on this chart that we visited a moment ago, success never happens. It's not something I experience. Success is not for me. Failure is expected. I may dream more than I actually do. I may be stuck perpetually. I may complain about others or envy others or have jealousy towards others. So as we look at these positions that we may take, winner, at least, or non-winner, there's a couple underlying things here that we see. Those who have the winner mentality, in other words, their identity is up there around a 10, have an ability to keep a conceptual wall between what they do and who they are. And this is an important concept that we train sales professionals on frequently, right? What I is not who we are. Who I am internally as a person, stripped of all my roles, right, is not defined by my roles. So that's another concept here, from a Sandler perspective, right? I need to maintain that separation. The other thing that I need to do is that I could do is work to keep that mentality in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range as high as possible. Certainly we vacillate. Certainly we have good days and bad days, but I want to keep my mindset as high as possible so that I can perform on the role side as high as possible. If you remember what we talked about early on, on the average, you can only perform in your roles to a degree consistent with how you see yourself conceptually. And how I see myself conceptually is on the left side here, 0 through 10. So something to think about in an exercise that we take people through frequently is if you were to strip out all of your roles, so think about all the different roles that you might have, right? Father, mother, brother, coach, trainer, mentor, business owner, friend, best friend, strip them all away, right? Who are you at the end? How do you rate yourself? Do you define yourself through your roles, or are you confident in who you are? We want to take a hard look at that. And this, to me, is the hardest part about sales. And I say that because sales, unlike any other type of profession, has us potentially on that roller coaster. We have the ups and downs, sometimes pretty extreme, and sometimes in the same hour or half an hour, certainly in the same day or week, we can experience that. So we've got to be very, very careful to have an understanding of who we are versus what we do. And to me, this is the hard work of selling. Following a sales process, as long as I understand it, it's relatively binary. I do the things or I don't. I follow the steps, I employ the technique, or I don't. This stuff that we're talking about today is the stuff that's a little more complex because it lives between our ears and behind our eyes. It's the thoughts that we have a hard time controlling. It's the thoughts that we have to manage, etc. So having a solid understanding of who we are and what we do and the separation between that is incredibly important. The other piece to this on the role side is maintaining separation between the roles. So if I think about myself as a business owner, a sales professional, a coach, a trainer, a father, a husband, etc., if I have a bad day as a sales professional, it does not define my other roles. And some people, some professionals that we talk to struggle with that, right? We may have a bad day and we go home and we kick the fridge at home, right? And the other concept here is to maintain that separation between the roles. So a lot going on in the first few minutes of this webinar and a lot to unpack there. So give consideration to who you are and what you do. That's one thing that plays into our self-esteem. The next piece of it is something that we may see internally or we may see on our teams. And that's the concept of negative self-talk. So if you're willing to share in chat, then just simple yes or no, do you have to manage negative self-talk on a daily or weekly basis in your head? I'm blessed that I don't have a ton of it, certainly have some, but it's not something that I necessarily have to manage, but I see it. I see lots of doubt internally. And I'm curious, do you see this across your team? Do you see it with yourself? Type that into chat if you're willing to share. If not, no worries. But negative self-talk is something that erodes, it erodes our self-image, right? It chips away at it. So we want to make sure that we're not a victim of negative self-talk, and we will see it. Now, if you're a leader on this or a manager on this call, we have to observe it in our teams, right? We've got to look for the subtleties of the language that people speak. And I'll talk about this in a moment, but we want to pay attention to it because it's erosive over time and it's very insidious and it affects performance. And it really speaks to belief systems, right? Do we believe things are possible, right? Do we believe things that are not possible? Are we glass half empty? Are we glass half full? And so negative self-talk, in addition to the big topic of identity and role theory, are two things that help chip away at a healthy self-esteem. The next one that I want to spend a couple minutes on, which is closely related, are disempowering words. Disempowering words. And so I'm going to ask you guys to go to chat again in a minute. And thank you for the participation in chat. I appreciate some of you saying, hey, not necessarily me. I see it on my team. The last year has been tough. Certainly, we've got to evaluate it and we've got to make choices on that, right? So while I may not be able to control the thought that says you can't do this or should you be doing this, I do have a choice of how I respond to that voice in my head, so to speak. And so we'll talk about the things that we can do to combat that. We may never make it go away. Some of us have a more active self-talk center than others. The question is, how do we engage with it? So disempowering words. Words absolutely matter, but what are the words that you are using? And are they empowering or disempowering? And this is something that I would encourage everyone on this webinar to take a hard look at. I have an unbelievable hatred for the word try. And the reason for that is that you cannot quantify try. It's an easy out for us. So in my head, try is incredibly disarming. What can I use instead? Well, I intend, I will, I can, I commit to. I may not use the word aim, but I want to use very, very intentional words. And if you spend any time with me, once in a blue moon, the word try will come out and I will stop myself in my tracks and correct it. Other empowering words or disempowering words, I'm sorry, other disempowering words to pay attention to: I should, I have to, I must. If you're a leader on the call, I would encourage you to call those words out, right? Ask your people to say something more intentional. If you're an individual performer on this webinar, use words like choose, desire, want, could, instead of should, have to, or must. Can't. Whenever somebody says, I can't do that, I always ask if they can't or they won't, right? Are they unable to, or are they unwilling to? Because if they're unable to, they don't know how, I may be able to train them. If they're not willing to, they choose not to, they don't believe, then I may be able to coach them. But I want people to use intentional words. So you can't, or you're choosing not to. Let's just call it what it is. Same thing, always, never, right? How can we be more intentional with that word, right? You make me, nah, nope, maybe, right? Let's just say no. Yeah, maybe, yes, right? If only, problem, how about next time, opportunity, or challenge? So here's what I want to challenge you guys to do. What are disempowering words that you hear frequently or that you may use that you would commit to correcting over time? Certainly not going to correct them today. It takes a while. to get these corrected. In fact, I think that all of this is a work in progress. So when we talk about, this idea of identity and role, and can I keep separation, between what I do and who I am, negative self-talk and disempowering words. Question is, what can we do about it? And that's really what we're here for, right? What are the things that we can do about it? I think one of the things, by the way, type in your disempowering words. I appreciate the engagement so far. Jody, I'm sorry with I did not understand. I like that, Jody. It's possible. Usually has a but. Todd, I appreciate that. Disempowering words, won't. I'd much rather hear Brad, I will not. Leo put, I will take care of that later. We often will give ourselves outs. And that's why I don't like try. If I'm asking for a commitment or there's an expectation of a commitment and someone says, well, I'll try, they might as well say no, or I'm going to put a half-hearted effort into it, right? Let's work to be intentional from that perspective. One of the things that we can do is we can journal. I have a love-hate relationship with journaling. I self-admit that. I have fits and starts with it, but one of the things that I have found particularly empowering over time is to engage in a daily BAT journal. So if you've spent any time in Sandler, you know that we view success through the lens of an equilateral triangle. Attitude being at the top, behavior in the left, technique over to the right. And it's those three things that we can control. So from a journaling perspective, as we look at our daily success, I can journal about my behavior. What am I committed to doing? What is my discipline? What's my routine? Right? So journaling about my behavior. What are my goals for the day, for example? My attitude. What is the attitude or mindset that I am declaring for this day? Right? I'm an I-10. That's my attitude. For example, right? I approach the world with positivity and an abundance mindset. And then what technique am I going to employ to keep my saw sharp? So we've found that BAT journals I've observed, and when I've used it, again, I admit, not perfect with journaling, but putting out a daily BAT journal is very, very empowering, and it helps me keep that separation between who I am at my core and what I do in this sales role, trainer, mentor, supervisor, coach, business owner role, etc. The other thing journaling is I can journal disempowering words that I'm using and the words that I intend to replace them with. I can journal the negative self-talk to get it out on paper so I can see it and deal with it. So that's one of the things that we can do from the perspective of how do I work on my self-esteem, right? How do I manage the roller coaster that we talked about early on? So that's one. Next thing that we can do is we can say things out loud. So as I'm engaging in self-talk, and I referenced this earlier, I may use the word try. I correct myself out loud. Instead of just pausing and replacing the word, I will out loud say, apologies, I'm working to get rid of disempowering words. So I'm going to change try to will. And that helps strengthen that. It sounds trite, but it helps strengthen that, not only in my head, but now I've got accountability when I say it out loud that I'm actually doing something about my disempowering words. Certainly if somebody says, hey, what's that all about? I'll tell them, look, I'm getting rid of disempowering words. My intent is to be very intentional in 2021. So that is what I am doing. Eventually it changes. Eventually those words go away. Maybe not 100%. I referenced earlier that try will occasionally slip out and I'll stop myself. But eventually the disempowering words go away. I'm not a fan of should, maybe, will, ought to, oughta. I'm not a big fan of those words. I find them to be lazy, and my mission is to get rid of them. So those are things that we can do to affect, in a very intentional way, affect the self-esteem and to create good habits. So if you think about, Andrew mentioned earlier that, the winner mentality is routine based, right? I'm very, very routine based. So starting the day with routine, such as a BAT journal, right? And being very intentional about that routine will create good habits. It will keep our heads in a good place, and it will help us manage that roller coaster that is both the sales game and the sales management game. So curious about your thoughts, curious about takeaways from this session as we get within the last 2 or 3 minutes of our time together. What are things that you might have taken away, or even questions that you have? Throw those into chat right now. Certainly for myself and my two colleagues, John Vanderslice, who's based in New Jersey, Tim Berry, who's based in Texas. If you need help with this, reach out. This is part of why we're here. We train, coach, consult clients all the time on IR theory, dealing with head trash, disempowering words. So if this is something you could benefit, get some help on, would love to help you out on this. Appreciate you taking some time on our Wednesday grab and go session. We will be back next week. John and Tim should be with us. So this is the first time that I've done a half an hour on my own. And so the time goes fast always. Hopefully you guys got a takeaway, and I would love to see it in the chat. So Jody, thank you for the positive words. Glad we could give you a refresher. If we can help you take the head trash out, absolutely reach out. We're here to help, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks, Leo. Appreciate it. Appreciate your positivity and engagement. Clarissa, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. Craig, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Have a great day, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.